Okay, everyone, good afternoon, and thank you all so much for attending today's webinar. We're going to be covering ScanMail 12, Service Pack 1, New Features and Best Practices. When we're finished, this replay will be available on our YouTube channel for anybody that may have missed this recording itself. And information on how to get to the presentation and so forth, we will send out to everyone who registered. Please feel free to ask any questions you may have over ScanMail in the Q&A feature of Zoom, not the actual chat session. This will help us keep things moving and hopefully get all your questions answered just as soon as we can. Only the presenters are able to speak, so this is going to be a great place for you to ask your questions. Anything that we're not able to get to in the presentation itself, we will follow up over the next few days in email and ensure all of your questions have in fact been answered. Presenting this session today is myself, Jerry Hayes, Customer Service Manager at Trend Micro, David Abramowitz, Senior Technical Advisor, John Shuman, Premium Customer Service Engineer for ScanMail, and Zhou, Director of Product Management for ScanMail. Thanks again, everyone. And David, turning it over to you, and I'm putting myself on mute till we're done.
Okay, thanks, Jerry, and welcome, everybody. Let's get right on to it. So first, a little bit about what's new in ScanMail 12. The first thing is Exchange Server 2016 support has been added. As far as upgrade paths, you can come to 12 from Exchange 2010 SP3 and above, or Exchange 2013 SP1 and above. We only support upgrading the installations for ScanMail 11 SP1 if you're using Exchange 2010 SP3 or above. And one other thing to note is that the end user quarantine, or what we call the EUQ, that function for Exchange 2016 is no longer supported. Microsoft discontinued support of our hooks into that features in Exchange 2016. So again, if you're moving to Exchange 2016, just be aware that the end user quarantine feature, which actually was used very little more often by our customers than other features, that feature is no longer available. SQL Server Express is installed if you don't have SQL Server during installation. 2014, SQL Server 2014 Express SP1 can only be installed on Windows 2008 R2 or above. Another thing you'll notice is the continuous protection when the SQL Server is unavailable. So what that means is if SQL goes down, this is where ScanMail stores its logging information and configuration settings, etc. So it's a critical piece. If the database goes down, ScanMail will go into local store mode, if you will, and store things locally until the database comes back online. The one thing to keep in mind there is that that is only for 48 hours. So after 48 hours, you really want to make sure that the database has come back up, or you may experience some unpredictable behavior in ScanMail. Also be aware that you should not stop the ScanMail service during the time when the database is offline. It won't be able to do any scanning or start again. So best to get the database up as soon as possible, but you do have a 48-hour window to do that. All right, and a few of the other features there I'll let you look at, and we'll actually get more into those in a little bit. Okay, here are some enhancements in SP1. This version is going to give administrators the ability to resend messages without going through the anti-malware scan. So that's a useful feature. If you know you're not going to need the malware scan, you don't need to run through that when you're releasing things from quarantine. It also provides separate information about ransomware on the summary screen. So ransomware is a big concern with our customers, and rightfully so. And so like the other products, this information is being separated out to be visible clearly as its own widget. ScanMail 12 SP1 adopts a new enhancement called URL Sandboxing. So what that means is we're sending unrated URLs, some special URLs, to be analyzed by the Deep Discovery Analyzer, which is what we call our virtual analyzer within ScanMail, or VA. So just like suspicious files, you can send URLs to the Deep Discovery Analyzer to determine whether or not they're malicious. And that will also help in decreasing false positives. There are two scenarios that we've added to also decrease false positives. One for the manual and scheduled scan. The advanced threat scanning engine level is down to level 1. So 0 is the least aggressive, 4 is the most aggressive. It's set to 1 by default for manual and scheduled scans to help decrease false positives. And we've also increased the amount of file extensions and names that you can specify from 100 to 200. All right, so a little bit more about the URL sandboxing. These are the URLs that can be sent to the virtual analyzer for a decision. Unrated URLs that come from WRS or our web reputation services, or URLs that will not be analyzed by default are the ones listed there. So any URLs from internal domains, any URLs in your approved URL list, or any URLs from the message sender approved list, which you can set on the web reputation page and also the virtual analyzer page. So any of those URLs in that bulleted list won't be analyzed by default. So before I get more into the details of ScanMail 12 SP1's features, just a quick update on the email threat landscape. This should come really as no surprise. Email is still the top vector for malware infection. And the latest Verizon 2016 data breach investigation report showed that 78% of data breaches are still using email as initial vectors of infection, either from the email or a malicious attachment, or an email with a malicious URL. So it's critical to have our scanning techniques and the best protection we can provide you at the email layer so we can stop these things from getting down to the endpoint and for you having to deal with them there. Also, the majority of ransomware start from phishing emails. So those phishing emails are very well crafted. They're highly targeted. Most of these things are a one and done. So they're very targeted to particular people. So that's why companies will see one attack that another company won't in terms of a very targeted phishing attack, because these guys spend a lot of money and a lot of time finding out everything they can about their target and making sure this is meant specifically for you. It looks very legitimate and relevant to your job or your line of business. If you're in HR, you'll get an email with a resume attached. So things that are very appropriate or relevant to your job. But if you click the weaponized attachment or the URL, then that's when the malicious payload gets downloaded, or an executable gets downloaded, which then later communicates with a command and control server, downloads additional components, and you probably know the pattern from there. And at that point, the endpoint would be infected. The other type of rising email attacks are BEC scams, so business email compromise is BEC. Usually they're not malicious payloads. The attacker forges a company's CEO, an executive team member, or maybe one of your business suppliers, and sends email that's targeted to the finance team or the HR team, and typically will request a wire transfer of money or ask for confidential information for business reasons. And so this is it doesn't look quote unquote suspicious on the receiver's end in HR or finance, because it's the CEO requesting this from them. But there are a few things to take note of in emails like this. The trick is usually in the email header reply to field. Attackers use a different domain of your company's domain as the reply to address. So when you reply to these emails, it goes to the attacker's mailbox, and then the attacker takes over for future conversations. So you can see there in the example that's circled the Emera with 1 R, right? And the reply to has Emera with 3 R's. So just a little trick like that that your eye may not catch, but the reply to address will go to the attacker. The volume, the amount of business email compromise scams that we're seeing is not as high as phishing, but it's more sophisticated, and it's got quite an impact if it succeeds. One thing that's new in the latest version of ScanMail 12, SP1, is that you're able to query the spam logs from ScanMail to in Control Manager. So you can send the logs. You see that if you can make out on the screen there what's in the red box, this is within ScanMail's Control Manager settings. You can check the box to enable sending of the spam logs to Control Manager. and then you'll be able to query them on the control manager side. For those of you who are not familiar with TMCM, Trend Micro Control Manager, that is our central console to which all of our products report, send their log data. It's also used for central reporting. And more importantly, it communicates top to bottom from our deep discovery all the way down to the endpoint to give threat intelligence and to distribute threat intelligence, I should say, in the form of suspicious object lists. So that means if you have something in ScanMail that you found and it's the first time you've seen the attachment, now we have a bad file name. Control Manager will add that to the suspicious objects list and distribute it to the other Trend Micro products. So if you're running Office Scan at the endpoint, for example, Office Scan will now know that this is a suspicious object, it's a bad file, and will not allow it to be written to disk. So that kind of threat intelligence sharing is controlled by Control Manager. That is the central hub for that information and the distribution of it. Okay, so as far as Exchange 2013 and 2016 integration, you can take a look there, see on 13, to be installed on the mailbox and the edge roles. It cannot be installed on an Exchange 2013 server that only has the CAS role, the Client Access Server role. And on 2016, again, both the mailbox and edge roles, the CAS role is discontinued in Exchange 2016. And what I mentioned before about the end user quarantine, the EUQ, say that 10 times fast, is no longer working with Exchange 2016. Microsoft removed the hook. Okay, so a few things, recommendations for scan settings for the different server roles. And this is really to find a balance, or to help you find a balance between performance and security. So this is a handy chart to reference. So for instance, just to take one example of this, if we're talking about the edge server role, the transport level scanning at the edge, if you're leaning towards performance, then you're going to want to have spam prevention and web reputation enabled at that level. If you're leaning towards security, then add to those two security risk scan and optionally content filtering and or data loss prevention, DLP. DLP is built into ScanMail, and I'll cover that in a little bit. So this chart is very handy to give you some thinking points about balancing the need for performance versus security and what our recommended scan settings are for those different roles. Okay, so these are a few of what I guess we'll call, helpful ScanMail features or unsung hero features of ScanMail that most people, most users of the product may overlook and not realize that the capabilities are there. One is DLP, or data loss prevention. It's built in and gives you the same integrated DLP as our Office Scan endpoint and as our Interscan gateway products have as well. So we used to have a standalone DLP solution. Now it's folded in and called IDLP, integrated DLP, into our products. And that makes for a much more efficient system and allows you to use those features and functionality as a lot of you were asking us to provide. So DLP, the second one is server management. It's a way to manage multiple ScanMail servers or multiple Exchange servers that have ScanMail on them. So I'll show you that. Search and destroy is a very interesting feature and allows you to do forensics or just basic searching for, if you know that there's a bad file in a certain mailbox and you want to see what other messages that have come through the Exchange system also have that bad file in them, or where this URL is, or where messages from this person are. You can search in multiple Exchange servers running ScanMail and delete those emails if you wish. So that's the search and destroy. And the last one is we've made some improvements to the quarantine resending. So we are adding one new X header. We get the SHA value. And when the message has that X header in the email, ScanMail uses the same method to calculate the SHA-1 to identify if it's a ScanMail generated email or a resent email. So we have some capability there to make that determination and differentiation. Okay, so now I'm going to move over and just quickly show you a DLP. All right. So three things that you need to know. It's sort of a built from the bottom up. A DLP policy is built from identifiers and which has keywords and expression lists in them. Those together will form perhaps a template, or and then you make up policies using templates. So these are some of the ways that you can build identifiers. In this case, expressions. We provide you a whole host of pre-built expressions so that you can get things like credit cards and names and so forth. Same with keyword lists, common medical terms. So after you have set your identifiers, then you build a template. And again, we've provided you with numerous templates, not just for the US, but worldwide. And the templates will have within them everything you need, whether you're searching on keywords or certain identifiers. You can create your own templates and just simply start adding expressions or keyword lists to it, multiple ones. And you also have an occurrences field. So if you're looking for things like a credit card number in a file, maybe it's okay if you see it once, but if you see it 5 times, you know, it's a problem. So that sort of thing for the occurrences feature. And you can just keep adding on to adding conditions and making them and or ors as well. So you can build some really good logic with your templates. And once you have that, you can then build your policies. Again, we have multiple built-in policies. So if any of you are concerned about compliance issues, we have PCI and HIPAA, etc. You can apply the policies to either just internal or all messages going outbound. And we can look for things in single message parts or multiple message parts. So if you want the policy to be triggered, if it matches, just like the note says here, a minimum number of digital assets in a single message part. So for instance, the body. But if you want to add up the occurrences in the body and the header and so forth, you can do that as well. So adding a policy is a series of 5 steps. Number 1 is, who are we talking about? You can do from any sender to any recipient, specific sender to a recipient, sender to a specific recipient, or both specific. Once you've specified who, it's what are we going to be looking at? Are we going to be looking at the header, the subject, the body, the attachment? What templates are we going to include in our policy, either ones that are pre-built or ones that you have built? Once we have that, what do we want to do with it? We can replace the text. We can replace the offending attachment with some text. We can quarantine the whole thing, or we can quarantine just the message part. We can delete the whole thing, back it up, or pass it. And all of those actions, you can also complement them with some notification, either to the sender or the administrator, or maybe the DLP team. You can forward it, like you see there, to the sender's manager. All kinds of actions there. And when we do the notification, there are a number of variables that you can use in the notification message to determine what's going to be sent in the notification. Also, if you've got a SIM, we can send an SNMP trap and send a bunch of information there as well, so you can customize that. We can also write to the Windows log if that's something you'd like to do there too. So the last step, once you've got everything defined there, is just to give the policy a name and to give it a priority. Now you'll see on the window on the bottom there that there are priorities for policies, so that you can determine the firing order of these things and which one should be looked at first. The status has an X if it's turned off, and if you click on that, it will turn it on. So that's really the last step, is just to enable the policy, give it a name, and then you're good to go. That's DLP. So let's talk a little bit about server management. Server management, it's one of the 2 things I find that's most often overlooked in the GUI. The other one is the real-time monitor that's right next to server management in the interface, which I'll show you. I won't go into that, but I'll show you where it is. That gives you a real-time look into the messages that are being processed, how many items of malware have been found, etc. It gives you a quick look, and it's also a way to verify that your ScanMail installation is working properly, is to look at the real-time monitor. Server management is used for a bunch of different things. Number one, you can use it to replicate settings to other ScanMail servers. So that's something that a lot of customers don't realize, is that you don't have to go to Control Manager to actually do that. Within ScanMail, you have the server management, and you can replicate settings. I'll show that to you. Actually, John will demonstrate that to you in a minute. The other thing is we have you can do a central log query and a quarantine query in the web console. So all of the items that are in the logs of multiple ScanMail servers, you can search at once, and the same for the quarantine. It uses the server management to collect the information from the other servers that are running ScanMail. And the last thing is you can use server management for centralized reporting, and we'll show you that as well. So let's take a look at server management. All right. So now I'm going to have John Shuman give you the scoop on server management.
Hello. I would like to demonstrate some of the benefits of using server management. This is a feature that many administrators might not be aware of, but is of great help for administrating your ScanMail environment. So as you can see, we have two servers here. One is SMEX1, and then over here on the other tab, we have SMEX2. So in order to replicate changes that we make on one server to one or more ScanMail servers, what we can utilize is this link up here called server management. Let's demonstrate this. So we're going to make a change. Let's just say we want to enable the spyware protection on our environment. So we'll enable it on one system here. We'll go ahead and save that change. Now, if we come over here to the second server, as you can see from a refresh, we'll go over here and check. This spyware is still disabled over here. So what we're going to do is go to the source that we want to make changes on, and then replicate these to the other server. So we're going to click on the server management link. This is going to go out and find all the other ScanMail servers in our environment. Okay, and so here we are. We can see that SMEX01, there's no checkbox here because this is the source. And here's SMEX02, our destination. We're going to go ahead and click here. And then we're going to check this little, or click this little replicate button at the top. Okay, so from here, we have two options. We can replicate all settings. This will replicate all ScanMail configuration settings. Or we can select the specified settings. In this case, security risk scan is one of the changes that we made. So we're going to go ahead and down here, we're going to click this deploy button. As you can see, very quickly, it can replicate those settings across to the other server. Okay, we're done here. We'll go ahead and go over to this other server, and we'll just click off and then click back on. And as you can see, spyware is now enabled on the other server. So that's one of the primary benefits of using server management for replication. Another bonus of using server management and enabling this in your environment is you can do remote queries for logs and quarantine queries. So for example, we're going to go down here to our quarantine query. Okay, I want to see if we have any detection. I'm just going to do a quick search, and as you can see, nothing is returned in the results pane. Okay, the reason is because our query target is isolated to local server. What we can do is select remote server, and this will pull up an entire list of all the ScanMail servers that have server management enabled and will allow you to query all of them within one web instance of the web console for any particular server. So we're going to add them all over here. We're going to rerun the same query. As you can see from our results, now we found something. You can see that this detection was made on server 01 at this time. Works exactly the same at the logs query section as well. You can run it local, or you can run it against remote to find any kind of various log information that you're looking for. And one last thing that we can also utilize is the report thing. One-time reports or scheduled reports. We can generate these on the fly and run them against multiple. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to generate a report, give it any kind of title you want, and again, we have the same situation where we can select local, where we can select all servers. We're going to add all servers, and we're just going to generate some basic scan status information and maybe a little security risk information. We'll run that. You'll see it's in progress. That completed. Let's go to view. And then now you can see across the different servers, 02 and 01, an overview of your environment and any of the detections that it may have had recently. Thank you very much.
Okay, so that's the server management piece, and something that's really nice about that, if you noticed when John was going through the replication of the settings, was that it's not a one-shot deal where ScanMail will replicate everything from one source server to the other. You really have some nice granularity there as to which settings you want to bring over. It's not just a one and done for the whole configuration, so that's really nice. So that's server management. The next thing is search and destroy, which some of our customers, again, don't know that it's in there, but it's a nice feature if you've got multiple ScanMail servers and if you're looking to do some seeking out of files or URLs or messages that might be present in the environment as a whole. It's a good tool for that. So one thing to know is that Exchange 2010, you can only take actions if you're on the same environment. So for instance, Exchange 2010 can't perform a search and destroy operation on an Exchange 2013 database. Okay, so that's one thing to keep in mind. You've got to run the search and destroy individually on different server versions. So best to have everything at the same rev to make it easiest, but you can do it if they're not. It's just it gets separated out a little more. You can perform search and destroy tasks on multiple Exchange servers only if the Exchange server versions are the same as the Exchange server version the ScanMail server is associated with, right? We've optimized the search criteria in the newest version. So Exchange 2010, we can use AQS. 2013 and 2016 use KQL to search the specific message parts. And so for an example, if you want to search for messages containing the word test in the message subject, you would type in something like subject:"test" in quotes. And for searching for messages containing the attachment test.xlsx, you could type attachment:"test.xlsx. So it's some nice ways to enhance the search criteria to make it easier to find the things that you're looking for. One thing to note also is that the default is 2 mailbox searches concurrent with a max of 50 per search. The maximum number of concurrent searches is 10, and the maximum number of mailbox searches is 500. But again, the default is 2 concurrent searches, 50 total mailboxes. But you can change that, and the maximums are 10 and 500 respectively. You do use the Exchange management shell to configure the discovery mailbox. So the discovery mailbox is the mailbox to which all of the results of the search and destroy operation go. And you set that up with the Exchange management shell. And there are also some throttling policy settings for Exchange 2013 and 2016, which I just mentioned, the default of the number of mailbox searches that you want to do concurrently and the number of mailboxes per search. So those are some throttling settings in the policy that you can configure. So that's search and destroy. Quarantine resending, so sending things that have been quarantined, resending them through. As I mentioned before, you can bypass the malware protection if you're just resending a message through and you know what it is, and clearly you don't need it to go through malware scanning again. You can prevent that from happening. Okay, so a little bit about the virtual analyzer, and that's our deep discovery analyzer. It's got two choices, two modes you can set. One is inline, in which case it'll intercept the mail to be scanned. This will introduce a brief delay. On average, it's about 3 to 5 minutes. Or you can go into monitor mode where we won't intercept the mail. Users get their messages immediately, and you can specify the kinds of files types that you want to send to the DDAn, which is the Deep Discovery Analyzer, or the Virtual Analyzer. We do give some file types that we highly recommend as those to be sent to the Virtual Analyzer. By default, suspicious files that the ATSE, or the Advanced Threat Scan Engine, detects will be sent. Scripts, JavaScript, etc., and Windows executable files. Those are always, by default, recommended and set to be sent to the Virtual Analyzer. One thing to keep in mind is that this is not an every single message type of thing. We're talking about maybe 1–2% maximum of all mail that has attachments or URLs that require further analysis to be sandboxed. And for those of you who aren't familiar, what sandboxing does is it will take that file and basically let it blow up in an image which contains the operating system and applications, and figure out what it's doing, what files is it dropping, what processes is it starting, etc., if it's malicious or not, and then giving that decision back. That's sort of part of a bigger picture, deep discovery, which is outside the scope of this discussion, but just to let you know, that's the kind of thing that goes on in the sandbox. Think of it as your, Custer's last stand. It's the last line of defense when we've thrown behavior monitoring, we've thrown anti-spam, we've thrown web reputation, thrown the kitchen sink at this thing, and still maybe there's something to determine there in terms of its capability as a threat. So that's what the Virtual Analyzer will do for you and give you some really good threat intelligence and decision on whether or not this is a good or bad file or URL. It's also got a verify submission capability, so that just is going to make sure that we've got a clean line into the Virtual Analyzer, and it will test the submission process of files to make sure that they can be sent and everything is good to go. One thing to note is not to check the complete documents or images categories when you're specifying what to send to the Virtual Analyzer. If you check the entire category of documents or images, that will bypass our heuristic analysis and will basically submit all those files into the sandbox with a potential massive overload of the Virtual Analyzer. So definitely something not to do. You want to get as specific as possible there with what you want to send, and not just pick the entire category of documents or images. Okay. A little bit about spam and our best practices recommendations for that. ScanMail has within it email reputation services. You can find it in the spam prevention category of the interface. Just make sure you enable email reputation, and that'll block IP addresses of the known spammers and via DNS query. So that's a good one to have on all by default, because it will filter all the junk up front. Even if you have something maybe out at the gateway, it doesn't hurt to turn this on too in case something is missed or the service is down. So it's a real nice feature to have implemented. One thing to know is that incoming messages scanned if they're from an unknown host, and the host is in the standard reputation database, in our web reputation database, then it will be flagged as spam. Content scanning, that's another one that is also built into ScanMail that is often overlooked or unused. You can enable that, which we recommend in the content scanning area. And you've got the ability to do some whitelisting and blacklisting in that respect too. So you can add addresses that are approved or senders that you want to block. And it's nice to have that content scanning because as the spammers are changing their methods, we're still scanning in real time for all kinds of things to detect whether or not the message is spam. Okay, then the next thing is the detection of a new spam source. So that's, we recommend enabling that as well. So it's another feature in there. Just go to spam prevention, content scanning, detect new spam sources, enable, which is very cool. And you'll kind of be a good neighbor that way because anything new that you find gets updated in our online reputation services databases, and customers all over the globe will then benefit from what you found. The last one is phishing. Of course, being the #1 threat vector for emails, the #1 entry point, I should say. Just go into the spam prevention area, content scanning. Again, you'll see a checkbox for detect phishing to enable it. And that's also the last of our 4 there, highly recommended best practices for preventing spam. As far as the settings for spam go, you'll see that there are 3, high, medium, and low. The default is low. It's the most lenient, and if that's checked, ScanMail will only filter the most obvious spam messages, but there's a very low chance that you'll have false positives, so that's the balance there. For the medium setting, ScanMail is going to monitor at a high level of spam detection with a moderate chance of filtering false positives, and high being the most rigorous level and the most aggressive level, monitoring all email messages for suspicious files or texts. So there's going to be a greater chance there of false positives. And by false positives, we're talking about email messages that ScanMail filters as spam when they're actually legitimate. So it's not a terrible problem to have in the false positive arena. It may be okay to be a little more aggressive sometimes than to actually let something through, but that's the difference between the high, medium, and the low settings. No surprise, email is one of the major vectors for ransomware attacks. Even though ScanMail already blocks most emails with ransomware links or attachments, there's no dedicated ransomware category in previous versions. And customers, you may not have any awareness about how much work ScanMail's doing to block the email with the ransomware. So in this patch, with the enhanced ransomware visibility, you'll know how many ransomware emails ScanMail has blocked. So best practices for ransomware, you're going to want to configure both spam prevention and web reputation. Just in case there's any confusion at this point about web reputation, we're not talking about URL filtering. That's very different. URL filtering says you can't go to ESPN during business hours because it's during business hours and you shouldn't be going to ESPN. Web reputation will say, oh, ESPN's website is okay, but the NBA page within ESPN's website has been infiltrated with malicious code, and we're not going to allow you to go there. It's now a bad URL, so to speak. So that's the difference. Web reputation looks at a bunch of different characteristics about how long the server's been up and how long the site's been there, the page, looking at all of the information within it. So there are a number of things that go in there. It's not just simple URL filtering. You can do that with our gateway products, but that's not the bane of web reputation. Web reputation is another weapon in the defenses against ransomware and malware and all of that bad stuff. So another one is the macro scan functionality. Very common method to hide things inside Word and Excel documents and embed them in. So enable that. Definitely enable, if you've got the Deep Discovery Analyzer, to use as the virtual analyzer for sandboxing. You definitely want to enable that in the virtual analyzer setting. There's a setting that says submit email messages to virtual analyzer, so enable that. If any of you, by the way, are thinking of going to Office 365, you should know that in that environment, you do not need an on-premise deep discovery for sandboxing, because we include cloud sandboxing of email attachments and URLs with Office 365, with Cloud App Security for 365. So just in case you're thinking of making the move, you're covered there with sandboxing as well. And lastly, to look at what's going on in ransomware, it's right in the GUI, right in the summary. There'll be a separate category from ransomware. So we're looking to give you more visibility into what's going on in terms of ransomware. A little bit more, of course, we encourage you, if you haven't already, upgraded as soon as possible to ScanMail 12. A lot of these features are not in the earlier versions. The 10 dot versions are actually probably end of life at this point, and 11 doesn't have the same features in here. So we really do put a lot of effort in putting in improved and new technologies into our scanning engines and giving you visibility into those features as well. So these are just a bunch of the different last list here of the best practices for ransomware. If you do not have the Deep Discovery Analyzer, you can see the 5th bullet there, then just set the aggressive level to 1. And that will do the best that ScanMail can do without the Deep Discovery in the picture. And also, when we give you the visibility into ransomware, we of course want you to block then the sender, the domain, the suspicious attachments in the ScanMail environment. We're going to do it for the bigger picture, for our databases online, for all our customers when we find things, but when you find things locally, you can also take some of those actions on your own system. All right, and if you do have Deep Discovery Analyzer in the environment, you can select specific file types to send to Deep Discovery Analyzer. We were talking about those before, and the defaults that are checked by default. And in the log for ScanMail, you can check in the log query type of VA submission. That is where you'll find in the log the entries for the files that have been sent to the virtual analyzer. They have a query type. You set your query type to VA submission or virtual analyzer submission. All right, so this gives you an idea of what is there now and what's coming. So we always want to put in newer or better techniques of or enhance our existing techniques to give you the best defenses against the threats that are out there now. So the number 1 there is the business email compromise. Number 2, you'll see that we've already got anti-malware, we've got the file type filtering, but machine learning. Now this is something that's at our endpoints right now in the Office Scan XGen version. Machine learning is also coming to ScanMail. And so we can provide some enhanced technology there and some different methods. We don't rely on any particular one to be the showstopper or the silver bullet. There is no silver bullet. So we want to throw as many many skillful technology as we can against these threats to make sure that we're giving you the best protection possible. We've got a number 3, file and URL sandboxing, but we're also going to be adding click time protection. So anything that doesn't get sandboxed at the time of click, we're going to check the reputation of that URL. So that's going to be also coming down the pipe this year. So as you can see, there are a number of different technologies that we're using to stop malware, and also, a number of different types of attachments that we're using those technologies against. Okay, so lastly, I just want to wrap by saying that this presentation, this material that we're talking about here, does not include the most recent patch for ScanMail, which is patch 1, which just recently came out. That's available in our download center, downloadcenter.trendmicro.com. Very much encourage you to take a look at that and install patch 1, a number of enhancements and fixes to issues as well. So you'll want to take a look at that. And with that, I will turn it back to Jerry.
Okay, David, thank you so much. And John, we really appreciate the presentation. Yi, thank you also for helping get all this information together, as well as making sure all of the questions have been taken care of and answered. We really appreciate that. Again, this presentation will be available on the Trend Micro YouTube channel for anyone that was not able to attend, or if you would just like to review this information again at a later time. We appreciate certainly all of the questions, and it looks like they've all been answered. If not, you can go ahead and email me, Jerry_Hayes at trendmicro.com, and I'd be glad to follow up. Please keep in mind that ScanMail for Exchange 11 is set to go to end of support on July 31st of this year. So we also have other presentations coming up for Office Scan best practices, as well as deep security. So keep an eye out on the product pages for an announcement, as well as your inbox. And also, you might want to go ahead and bookmark our YouTube page once we get that out to you for any sessions that you might have missed previously and anything that will be coming up as well. Thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you on the next webinar.